And we are live. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the stream. I hope you're all doing well. I'm very happy to have you back here for the first interview of the new season and our interview of the week with a member of the European Parliament. So tonight we will discuss with MEP Vladimir Bilcik from the EPP, so on the right side of EU politics. He's 47 years old and he has been a Slovak MEP since 2019, so that's his first mandate. He is a member of the Committee on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs, the Special Committee on Foreign Interference in all democratic processes in the European Union, including disinformation, the Committee of Inquiry to investigate the use of Pegasus and equivalent spyware, and is a substitute in the Committee on Foreign Affairs and the Committee on Constitutional Affairs. So a lot of committees. He is a very busy man, and that will make for a very interesting topic to discuss tonight. But before we dive into the interview and the questions, let me remind you the house rules for anyone who would be new with us tonight. So, our guest will be with us for about an hour. After that, he will be able to go and enjoy the rest of his evening or work, since he's still in the parliament. And you will be stuck with me for another half an hour to discuss what you thought about the interview, provide interpretation, things that might require additional explanation, questions, that sort of thing. As usual, I have prepared my questions for Mr. Bilcik, and I have collected questions from people on Reddit and Discord. You can, of course, ask your questions and react via the chat. It's there for that. I will keep an eye on it, and I will pick among your suggestions. So feel free to do it and react in the chat. But as always, don't spam and stay civil. So the goal of these interviews is for you to better understand what's the job of an MEP, what they stand for, what are their priorities, and maybe some of their opinions on the EU, on general EU political questions. We'll try to not go too deep into policy discussion, and we'll not cover national politics unless it's linked to the EU. So keep that in mind when asking your questions. So on this note, I suggest that we start. Good evening, Vladimir Bilcik. Welcome on the channel, and thank you very much for taking the time to be with us tonight. So you listened to my little introduction a minute ago. I introduced all the committees you are in and all that. Is there anything you might want to add before we dive into the questions?
Hi, and very good evening to everyone from Brussels. We have a beautiful evening here. It's been a very nice and warm day, and we've had a full day already. The parliamentary season has begun in full swing. And thank you for the kind introduction. I wouldn't add anything. I just rather prefer to go into questions, and let's have a good discussion.
All right, perfect. So let's start by the beginning. So it's your first mandate, you're an MEP. How and why did you go into politics and later become an MEP? What was the spark for you?
I've actually been working on European politics for over 20 years. As an academic, as a researcher, I used to teach European politics at university back in Slovakia. I was also, for a number of years, a think tanker doing research on various aspects of European politics. And at some point I thought, instead of doing advising, writing policy briefs, there are things I'd like to see changed. So over time, I, of course, moved from policy advising, thinking about politics, to trying to make politics happen. And I was also very frustrated with the way politics, especially European politics, was done or wasn't done in my home country, in Slovakia. And that's what motivated me to run for the European elections in 2019.
And so now you're an MEP. Is it the same as what you used to teach in university? Is there things that actually are different from what you taught? Or now that you behind the big desk, what's your feedback?
Look, politicians are people made of flesh and blood, and we have a lot of emotions, a lot of strong opinions, and of course, you can fit all these things into nice categories, just like the academia often tries to do. So it's very complex. But what I will say is that some 20 years of having studied, researched, written on, published, taught European politics really got me ready for being able to kind of work the ins and outs of this house from day one. And I think that also was very important in terms of helping me out to really make sure that I get to work on things which I feel strongly about and where I feel that I can make a difference. So it was extremely helpful, the background. But of course, the realities are always a bit more complex than the theory. But I also enjoy these days, and whenever I meet young people, students, or just people keen on talking about politics, to sharing the insights, and especially with researchers. I try to do as many interviews with people collecting data because I know how difficult it was at some point to reach out to politicians and policymakers in the past when I was trying to collect that. So there is a link which is extremely useful, and I am most grateful and humbled to have this opportunity that people actually gave me the trust in these elections to serve for 5 years.
I have a first question in the chat who's asking, would you return to teaching? And if yes, when? After your career, or are you done with your teaching days?
I actually always enjoy meeting young people, and of course, it's not teaching; it's public discussions. I enjoy going to see students, talking to the students. So certainly, politics is service, and once the service is done, teaching is one of the possibilities and options, and I have enjoyed it. I enjoyed it in the past, and I'm sure I can enjoy in the future. So it is certainly one of those options out there, and I would be happy to do some teaching once there is, of course, more time.
So, in the meantime, you're in the parliament, you have to do some work. You are, among the many committees you are in the Libe committee, so the civil liberties, home affairs, and all that. And one topic that is quite hot in Libe and quite hot in the EU for the past few years is the topic of the rule of law. There's been some issues with the rule of law in some European countries, the most well-known being Poland and Hungary. So how do you think the EU should deal with rule of law with this country, bearing in mind that we have, let's say, a bit of a blockage in the usual normal way to deal with these topics, because we have Article 7 in the Council, but member state can't agree because there is a Poland covering Hungary and Hungary covering Poland. So how do we get out of this?
My connection to rule of law and my work on rule of law is actually specifically tied to one working group, which we have, a monitoring group, which we have inside the Libe Committee. Libe Committee is one of the largest committees in the parliament. And of course, we cover a lot of topics. And we have a special monitoring group dedicated to democracy, rule of law, and fundamental rights. And it was established actually in the aftermath of the killing or murders of two journalists, one of whom was Daphne Caruana Galizia from Malta, and the other one was Jan Kuciak from my home country, Slovakia, and his fiancée. This is actually my direct connection to why I'm keen on rule of law, because I believe without rule of law, without strong and independent media, you cannot actually have space to work and live in daily life the European values, which we, of course, are trying to safeguard, but also help develop through the rules which we make. So my connection is also very much that kind of directed through the experience of my home country. This is the European connection. And as you mentioned, Hungary and Poland, those are the most often mentioned subjects. But for instance, in my country, in Slovakia, following these two murders, we had some positive changes in the area of rule of law, also in the area of justice reform, in the area of media reform, in the area of political changes, which have underpinned some positive developments in the rule of law. So Europe can make a difference through monitoring. We've been doing the same in Malta as well. There it's a bit more frustrating. But there again, we already have suspects who are accused of having killed Daphne Caruana Galizia, and there have been some rule of law reforms in this country as well. So it's about every single country, and actually what we have and have had for the past couple of years, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but we have a lot more tools now to safeguard rule of law. We have regular rule of law reports published by the Commission, and they lead to constant dialogue between the Commission and all member states. I think during this mandate, we adopted one of the most important legislative pieces connected to rule of law, and that's the piece of legislation which ties the distribution of EU money, EU funds, to the conditionality, which is the very basis of when the countries can get the EU money and the EU funds. This is one of the reasons why, for instance, Hungary has not received a single cent from the Resilience and Recovery Fund, which is the extra fund, an extra amount of EU money, which has been dispersed as a reaction to the consequence of the pandemic. We are doing a lot more than we used to. I know there is still a lot of frustration, but I think we've managed to develop a lot more tools, and we are continuing to do that. And every single country has its rule of law problems. There is not a single EU member state which is perfect. And I think it's important we have a level playing field and kind of the very same basis to judge problems in every single country. But we also have to be extremely serious and diligent when we discover those problems. So unless there are systemic changes, for instance, in those two countries you mentioned, in Poland and Hungary, we should also be quite consequential when it comes, for instance, to the distribution of the EU money in EU funds. That's one of the tools and powerful tools which we have at our disposal.
But like you mentioned, the EU created this new tool to deal with indirectly with rule of law through EU funds. But like I mentioned, the normal tool to deal with rule of law is a bit paralyzed. I mean, it was not conceived for a situation that we have now. And again, like you mentioned, there's rule of law problems in every country, but Hungary and Poland are the let's say the big ones, the two big cases. Do you think that we can keep on like this and say, okay, now we have the conditionality and so it works, or should we like rework a bit the system to deal with it?
Look, you referring to the Article 7 procedure, but the Article 7 procedure is like a nuclear weapon, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and we have learned by now, if you're going to trigger this, you really have to have a case which you know, this is the ultimate use this is the tool of ultimate use. The problem is that before we encounter some specific problems in specific countries, we didn't have any additional tools. Now we have plenty more. So I think we are better positioned to deal with any other new cases of breaches in the area of rule of law. And, you know, just this month we will be discussing our monitoring rule group, the problems in Spain, for instance, with the Spanish Constitutional Court, and there are some real issues there. And I'm just mentioning it to illustrate that this is not just about Poland and Hungary, but of course we have additional tools to deal with problems in Poland and Hungary at the moment. And I'm not saying that we're gonna be able to resolve them tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. But we can certainly put a lot more pressure on the governments and those who are breaching the principles of rule of law through various ways in this country. So we are better equipped today than we were probably when we started the mandate in 2019, and that's good news.
I have a question in chat linked to rule of law, even if not directly. So the EU proposed a new directive, the anti-SLAPP directive, so a directive that is meant to prevent abusive procedure against journalists, notably. So what do you think about this new proposal by the Commission? Is it a step in the right direction? Do you want it reinforced? Does it go too far? So what do we think?
I think it's a step in the right direction. I very much support it. In fact, I am very much in favor, and this is tied to one aspect which is connected to rule of law, and that's the fight for free, independent, and quality media, both public and private. And I think there is a lot we can do, and we can do again from the European level. And one example is this anti-SLAPP initiative. SLAPPs are and have been a terrifying tool in the hands of the powerful organized interests, powerful people, powerful individuals, companies. to attack, to go after journalists, but also powerful states who may feel that this and that journalist is uncomfortable because they speak out, they write the truth, they investigate stories which the powerful people do not like to have discovered, and of course through slaps they try to intimidate the journalists. So I think the anti-SLAPP regulation, the anti-SLAPP initiative is an excellent step forward, and I hope we can get a good European basis to fight the SLAPPs across the EU. Similarly, the European Commission is going to propose this fall a European Media Act. That's, by the way, one big package of legal initiatives to watch for the rest of the mandate in the area of rule of law. I'm very much looking forward to also working on some of these files if I get a chance, because they will introduce additional tools to protect the vocation, the profession of a journalist. And I think we need these kinds of European safeguards to compensate for deficiencies of various protective mechanisms at the level of member states. I think it's only good. And, we took rule of law years ago for a given. Now we're realizing unless we step in and have protective mechanisms at the level of the EU, the rule of law might not be there anymore. So I think these are good things, good initiatives, and I support them. And I think there is a broad support across the political aisles in this House for these sorts of measures. I think the bigger fight here is between the European Parliament and the Council, because certain member states may not be so keen to go along with these measures. But within the European Parliament, I think you will find a good majority of MEPs supporting these measures.
And so on the rule of law, we mentioned several mechanisms. We mentioned the conditionality for EU funds. Now we talked about the anti-SLAPP directive. Are there any tools else that can take a role, to improve the rule of law in the EU, or do we have like a limited tools at EU level?
Well, there certainly are, and let me talk about the ones where I feel strongly about, and then the ones that I've also been working on. Rule of law and democracy cannot exist without strong quality, independent media, journalism, credible news, and I think this is something which has been under increasing threat. And this is one area where I think we need to again get very serious about facing it, and where I see European solutions. Some are getting in place, but we need a lot more, particularly when it comes to fighting manipulative, distortive, dangerous disinformation, which is something which we have been very acutely aware of since, especially across the EU of 27 since Russia's brutal aggression against Ukraine. But it's been a problem across parts of the Union for a number of years. And it's a problem which has been very much accentuated by the online space. And this is where, for instance, the Digital Services Act, and another extremely important piece of legislation, which we just passed a few months ago, and which will be implemented gradually in coming weeks and months, can make a difference, because it will make, first and foremost, the principle of what is illegal offline should be legal online, stand in online space, and that's important. So all sorts of hate speech and things which I think directly attack democratic principles and undermine rule of law. But also there are going to be certain mechanisms in there which can help us fight the harmful content. The hoaxes, the lies, the manipulated disinformation, the Russian propaganda, and I think this is also important. This is where we need to put a lot more pressure on the big online platforms. I'm not going to name any of them, but we all know what they are. And I think we need a strong European legislation here, because I'll tell you honestly, and again, here I'll help myself with my own country. a government in Slovakia is in no position to be on conversation with a large online platform because they are a global player and the Slovak market is too small, too uninteresting, even when we talk about harmful content and the spread of Russian propaganda. But when it comes to the European Commission, the European market, the European voice on behalf of member states and on behalf of different partial markets and languages, particularly the smaller ones, that's where it can make a real difference. That's why I'm pleased, also coming from a smaller member state, that we have this piece of legislation, which would basically make every user online, whether or not you are from Germany, France, large member state, or a smaller one, you're from Bulgaria, Slovakia, Latvia, feel as safe as possible, and especially equally safe. So I think a lot of the political discussions, a lot of the attacks against rule of law, a lot of the structural problems we have with democracy have moved from the physical space to online space. And this is where I feel that we need to also look at ways how we can legislate the level of the European Union, because Europe gives us power. Collectively, we are a lot more powerful, and we can set the rules not just for the EU 27, but also we can lead an example for others, like the United States. I was in the US on a mission in February with the special committee, which is set out in this European Parliament to help us fight disinformation. And we had some wonderful talks with the US policymakers too, and legislators who were keen to ask us about our legislative answer to the fight against disinformation. And perhaps what has come out of the Digital Services Act might be an inspiration to what the Americans do to protect their safety online. Of course, we saw live what harmful content can do when it spills over into physical world with the attack against the US Congress following the election of Joe Biden and Trump's big lie about the stolen election. So this is something where I think we can really make a difference at the level of the EU as well. And of course, we'll be looking very carefully at how the Digital Services Act is going to be implemented and put into practice.
And speaking of disinformation, since you are also in the special committee on disinformation, like you mentioned, it was already the case before, but since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, we face even more disinformation from Russia, but not only. We know that it comes from other countries as well. So someone had asked me the question, how can the EU counter the Russian disinformation, especially since you come from a smaller country or eastern country, so you're faced more, I would say, with the disinformation from Russia. So what can the EU do to actually counter disinformation?
Excellent question, and thank you for that. I actually think of myself as a European and as a Central European, yes, Slovakia is on the eastern side of the EU. But we do like to think of ourselves as Central Europeans, and I hope that our eastern neighbors, such as Ukraine and Moldova, will have a chance to join our club in not too distant future, as we offer them the candidate status as a reaction to the war. Now, what can we do? I think we can do a lot. We can do a lot in terms of having basic rules which will make the online platforms much more publicly responsible towards the spread of Russian propaganda, disinformation, harmful content, hoaxes. This is just about, it's not about taking down the content. It's not about restricting free speech. I think everybody should be able to say online whatever he or she feels, as long as it's within the legal realms. The problem is that at the moment, the business model of these platforms is such that the big emotions, the big shockers sell. And often these are tied to the spread of harmful content, disinformation. This has to do with the algorithms that they use. This is online platforms. We have no idea how they work. But with the new legislation, we'll have access, or the regulators will have access to check how actually these platforms are fighting against the spread of such disinformation. So, in the past, before we had the online world, you had a number of people who had extreme opinions. But when you had them in a room, they were probably in a small corner. Now, when you get these people in the online space, they are often taking the centerpiece of attention. And that is a problem, and this is why we need to make the online space safer through regulation. So I wouldn't be worried about regulation. I would be basically saying, this is a way to give free speech a real chance, because free speech needs a fair chance. So that's one of the ways where I think we can still look at how we can improve the Digital Services Act and be more effective here. But also, I think we can do a lot more when it comes to people being aware of disinformation. Everyone should pause, think twice before he or she spreads anything online. We should pay attention to any shockers that are in front of us. And we should always check on trustworthy sources. If you like to read the news, get it from the credible sources. Support your good local newspaper in your country, or even in the online space more globally. Don't hesitate to purchase it. Instead of maybe going for one too many beers outside in the evening, buy a good paper. All these things are. This is. I'm taking a bit on a light note here, but basically, I think we need to safeguard, as Europeans, the public space we have created, and it is threatened by disinformation. So we need to support not only the fight against the spread of disinformation, but we also need to find ways how we support the spread of credible information through credible media.
Mm-hmm. Going away from Libe and the rule of law and disinformation, another committee of inquiry that you're part of is the Pegasus Committee, that was created to investigate spyware, basically. And lately, the thing that has been making the news regarding the Pegasus Committee is that we've learned that one of your colleagues, a Greek socialist, Nikos Androulakis, was spied on by the Greek security services. And as it happens, Nikos Androulakis is not only an MEP, he's also the leader of the Socialist Party in Greece, so the opposition, part of the opposition to the current government in Greece, which adds to the suspicion. So, following this revelation, the Commission had asked Greece for additional information to know what was going on, why was Nikos Androulakis spied on through Pegasus, and Greece replied to the Commission, basically telling it to mind its own business, because it relates to national security. So, do you agree that the use of spyware is something that is national security and the EU should not have anything to do with it, or, on the contrary, the EU has a say on that?
I think the EU definitely has a say, because this is also something which touches on the way the institutions work. If I had my mobile phone checked for spyware, by the way, and we as MEPs can now do this. That's one of the practical consequences of having this investigative committee. So I think certainly this is a European problem. It's a problem that's as the news come through, seems to touch on most member states. We have issues in Poland, we have issues in Hungary, we have issues in Belgium, we have issues in France, we have issues in Spain, we have issues in the Netherlands, we have issues in Greece. There are questions about spyware in Germany. This is not a single member state problem, and of course it's also tied to trade. Who supplies these spyware products? It's often firms from third countries. So there are ways to control the sales of these items. Yes, it's an extremely sensitive area to investigate because it falls within the realm of national security. There are questions you can ask in this inquiry committee, but you may not get many public answers. But we also have Europol, which is an institution which has been vested with new powers to help safeguard the security of the European space. And I think one of the things that could come out of this committee is to help us set clear rules for spyware and such, and its use in public domain. I find that is something which is extremely potentially extremely dangerous when it comes to targeting specific individuals. without any reason or in a way which might prevent them from doing their job, being a journalist, being a politician, be it whatnot. So I think we can. This investigative committee is there first and foremost to collect the data on the depth of the problem, but I also think that there must be a European answer ultimately to this problem, because there are certain rules which can help us limit the problem. Now, I would also say, and I will say this publicly, that there may be reasons when, for the sake of national security, a country may want to use an equipment which helps it prevent a terrorist attack. But there has to be a very clear setting here and a very clear rules, and there have to be very clear institutional prerogatives also for the committees, perhaps at the national level, but also at the level of the EU, which have a chance to investigate the proper use of such equipment. So, it's a whole new area. And again, as technology progresses, I think we need to catch up with the rules at the level of the EU and at the level of the national member states. And by the way, last point on Greece, I will just say, and maybe that's a good advertisement for everyone. We are going to have a special hearing on Greece in the PEGA committee this week. So watch it, follow it, and perhaps we can all learn something more.
Still on the Pegasus committee, besides the investigation, you touch on a tricky subject, which is whether spyware should be allowed to be used in the EU in the first place at all. So I know it's not the purpose of the Pegasus committee, but where do you stand on the debate? Do you think that member states should be allowed to use spyware in some cases, or should it be banned altogether?
It's a very good question. And we just had in our last hearing, we had a very interesting contribution by an expert who said, these days, you may have more than 1 million people exposed to spyware, because you can download a simple spyware software into your device, with which you can spy on your neighbor, your loved one, quotation marks, your whoever, enemy. And you can follow and track them down. So I think it would be naive to think that spyware as such is something which we can get rid of. It will not happen. What we can, however, do is to try to set very clear rules which prohibit the use of spyware at a certain level, and which strongly regulate the use of spyware when it comes to, for instance, proper authorized use to help us prevent a terrorist attack. I think there is a balance here, and that's my answer to your question. There are legitimate security concerns and security interests where I think under certain conditions, very clearly delineated by the rule of law, security services may use such equipment. And by the way, this is something which wouldn't be new, right? It's happened for decades, in some ways centuries. But these are very modern technologies, and I think we need different kinds of rules to make that line a lot clearer.
Okay, so moving away from the Pegasus committee, something that I didn't mention in the introduction is that you are within AFET the Parliament's standing rapporteur on Serbia, which is a candidate country to join the EU, and Serbia has been a bit difficult lately. We have seen Serbia being pretty sympathetic to Russia since the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine. There's been a lot of tension with Kosovo. As of a couple of weeks ago, Serbia had postponed/cancelled the Europride. Back in April, there even was a poll that showed that most Serbians, so it was 44% of Serbians, that said that they were now against joining the EU, while only 34% were in favor of joining the EU. So that brings the question, does Serbia actually want to join the EU, and shouldn't we as Europeans accept Serbia or let the problem slide? So what's your analysis?
Very, very complex set of questions.
Yeah, easy question, I know.
I will try to be clear and brief. I do believe that we need Serbia inside the European Union, but Serbia has to change. Serbia has to adjust Serbia has to come to terms with its past, look towards its future, and has to make a number of important domestic changes before it is ready to join the European Union. This is, by the way, the message from my last report adopted in the plenary of the European Parliament in July this year. And if I can sum it up, also taking into account the latest context of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Serbia has to move on a number of domestic rule of law reforms. And we have been very closely working with Serbian authorities on this. I myself, together with other MEPs, was engaged and have been engaged for the past just about 3 years on the inter-party dialogue, which was trying to bring the Serbian opposition back to parliament, back to elections, because it was boycotting those public institutions. And so I was very heavily engaged inside Serbian politics, in addition to being to being the standing rapporteur. So there are rule of law reforms, and of course there is still a ways to go. Serbia has to align with our international positions. This includes also sanctions against Russia. This includes aligning with foreign security policy of the European Union. Serbia's alignment rate has been by far the lowest in the region of the Western Balkans. And of course, unless there is a movement in this direction, Serbia is not going to be ready to join the European Union, and that's also very clear from my report. And that's a message which I repeat to my Serbian friends, partners, and colleagues, and we have a very open and honest conversation about this. And last, but certainly not least, Serbia has to move, and this is coming terms with the past, on normalization of relations between Belgrade and Pristina. So normalizing relations between Serbia and Kosovo. There have been some encouraging steps as of recently. And I'm pleased to say that, for instance, there's an agreement on the free movement of people now, and the people living in Kosovo and the people living in Serbia with their respective IDs can move across the border. And that agreement was achieved, and there are some important negotiations for next few weeks and months ahead of us on recognizing the license plates for the people living in Kosovo, in different parts of Kosovo, because there are Serbs living mostly in the north and Albanians in the south. I'm simplifying here very much for the sake of time. And we will have difficult discussions on energy, but we have a special representative dealing with this. By the way, it's my compatriot Miroslav Lajčák, who is leading the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina. So these are three elements where Serbia needs to make progress. And you did mention Pride, the Euro Pride, which is scheduled to take place in Belgrade on the 17th of September. I actually announced publicly at the end of last week that I would be coming to Belgrade for this event. And I sincerely hope that the intensive talks between the organizers and the authorities in Serbia, which are going on and are continuing, are going to lead to a conclusion that the Euro Pride will take place. I think it's important that this event, to which, by the way, Serbia itself committed itself, and the new Prime Minister designate Ana Brnabić committed herself to this back in 2019, that Serbia will hold this in Belgrade. Belgrade is a lively city. It's a great city. I like it very much. And it's an open, free city. And I hope that everyone can come and freely just stand up for their basic rights and fundamental freedoms. Anyway, there is a long way to go. And the short answer is, unless Serbia changes, it is not going to be ready to get into the European Union. At the same time, we should always be ready to engage the Serbs, to work constructively with them. We don't want to lose them. We want to make sure they move towards Europe. They don't move towards Russia. There is a strong Russian influence there. It's been there for the past couple of decades. And I hope we can help the Serbs also move away from dependency on Russia's security, Russia's arms, Russia's energy supplies. And this is all part of the important dialogue, which is also conducted by us in the European Parliament with the Serbian authorities.
Still on Serbia, I had a question in the chat about the relationship between Serbia and Kosovo. It's a complicated topic on both sides, of course, but do you think that Serbia will make its peace with Kosovo as an independent country, or will that remain an obstacle for the foreseeable future and ultimately like block a bit their ability to join the union?
With goodwill on all sides, there can be relatively quick and vast progress when it comes to normalizing relations between Belgrade and Pristina. And we've seen it in recent weeks on these ID cards, when suddenly the issue, which was not resolved for years, could be resolved very quickly. It's a compromise solution, politically difficult. I know politically difficult also for Serbian side, also for the Kosovo side, but it's there. So with dialogue, there can be a solution. The point is, it cannot be imposed. It has to be negotiated. The sides have to agree. But I tell the Serbs, you cannot continue to live in the 1990s. The realities around you have changed, and your future must be in the EU. Serbia is surrounded by mostly EU member states. And of course, much of the Western Balkans is surrounded by mostly EU member states. So I think it's in our geostrategic interest also to help the country move in this direction. You asked the question, will Serbia make its peace with Kosovo? I am convinced there is not any imminent danger of a military conflict or a war.
Yeah, that's more what I meant.
I know that what you meant, but there has been a lot of tension, so I don't think this is an issue. But will there be a lasting arrangement? I very much hope so. I encourage the Serbian authorities to work on it. There is a huge push towards it. Most recently, there are special envoys also established by President Macron and Bundeskanzler Scholz, who are going to help Miroslav Lajčák and the EU structures to work on this dialogue. Also, Americans have their special envoy there. So I think the US, the EU are working together hand in hand to help make this dialogue move forward, because it's in the interest of the whole region. Mm-hmm. Without that kind of settlement, the region as such may not move towards the European Union.
And speaking of that, of the region, we have seen that during the last Euro-Balkan summit before summer. There is growing frustration in the Western Balkan countries that are that want to join the EU, that the EU actually is slowing down the process and doesn't want them inside. So do you think that the concerns are justified, and how long do you think it will take for them to actually join the EU?
I think there is some justification to the frustration. Part of it is that, quite frankly, we haven't paid as much strategic attention. We haven't devoted as many political resources, public resources towards enlargement as we should have. The last enlargement we had was in 2013 when Croatia joined. Since then, we haven't had one. Actually, we had an exit of a large member state. So we've become smaller. This should actually make enlargement a bit easier. I always tell my friends and partners in Montenegro, who have been the front runner in the enlargement process, although at the moment they're going through a heavy political crisis, that we shouldn't have a problem accepting you. You're a small country of less than 1 million people. We just lost a huge one. So accepting a small country from the Western Balkans shouldn't be a problem. But of course, they have to fulfill the criteria. So it's not a simple story. The frustration to some extent is justified, because a lot of member states didn't want to discuss enlargement in a serious way, rather are keen on slowing it down, even blocking it for various reasons. But I think with Russia's aggression against Ukraine, there has been a game changer. Enlargement is back on the agenda. Ukraine and Moldova have become candidate states. This would have been unthinkable before the 24th of February. Now it's the reality. And I think this is also a chance for the Western Balkans. Mm-hmm. Let's all work. Let's all concentrate on how we can complete the enlargement in the Western Balkans, how we can work on Maoist neighbors. That also necessitates some internal reforms within the European Union, including getting rid of some veto powers for single member states. But I think this is all doable. This is the project for the next decade or two. But I think the best answer to the frustration would be if we have one or two success stories in the next couple of years. I see, for instance, Montenegro as still a potential success story if it sorts out its current political crisis. If we get one success story, that might motivate others. If others in the region see that one country can do it, that can really help the race for enlargement in the region in a serious way. Because at the moment, there has been a lot of nice words, there is a lot of lip service, but there is little action. So I think we need to kind of have a bit of a geostrategic vision for why the Western Balkans must be inside the EU. It's a lot less costly for us than to keep them out and have the Russians on the ground so close to our borders in the Western Balkans in this power vacuum there. And also on the other hand, the countries on the ground have to do their homework, which they have been keen to avoid.
Yeah, that's a common tendency, I would say. Speaking briefly about the 24th of February, Slovakia has a border with Ukraine. How have Slovak people taken the situation since the beginning of the war? Has there been worries among Slovak people that the war could reach them, or that if Ukraine was to fall, Slovakia could be next on the list? How was the reaction to all this in Slovakia?
That's an excellent question. Of course, the war was a huge shock. I remember myself. I was in the U.S. on the European Parliament's mission during that week, and I just, it was hard to believe to see those bombs falling on Kiev and other places across Ukraine. I will say I'm very proud of my fellow citizens in Slovakia, how readily they welcomed a huge wave of refugees. Because the first reaction, the first few hours, first few days was thousands and thousands of people pouring across the border. And of course, everybody concentrated on trying to help the border guards, the public services, the civil society, the NGOs, the people. I think we really showed big hearts. And that was important. It was a very important reaction. And we saw similar reaction in Poland, for instance. And I think this is something which has helped to reinforce the European solidarity. And yes, people are worried that the war might come. Nobody knew what would happen. Imagine if the Russians actually had taken Kiev, if they had taken much of Ukraine. We have a border which is right there. I've been to Ukraine many times in the past 20 years. I have many friends there. I've worked on different projects there. I know the country very well, and I wish the best for it. So it's a good thing that the war actually, at the moment, seems to be contained. But it's as intense as it was before, and Ukraine has to win, and this is going to be the real test. Slovakia has been at the forefront of supporting Ukrainians. We have supplied arms, we have supplied whatever we can, but of course, as the efforts go on, as the time flies by, we have to work together with the people, also in our country, our countries across the EU, to make sure that their hearts and minds are with the Ukrainians. So from the shock, we got very practically oriented to how we can help. And now I think the challenge also for us politicians is to help sustain and help, because you get a lot of this propaganda these days that it's the sanctions which are responsible for the high prices.
I was going to ask you that, yes.
It's not the sanctions. It's Putin and his war. If this war had not started in the first place, we wouldn't be having any of this counter-reaction, and we wouldn't be having many of the crises which we are facing at the moment. So yeah, I'll let you ask a question, but it is a complex situation. But I think there is a real clarity, certainly in my head, and certainly still in the hands of many of my brave citizens between the evil and the good.
So, like you mentioned, the current energy crisis is partly due to the situation in Ukraine, the invasion of Ukraine, and now in every member state we see that citizens are very worried. They see their bills getting higher and higher. What can the EU do to try to assuage the situation, both I would say at an industrial level, so the definition of the price of energy, and also on the level of consumer? What can the EU do to help people?
Well, several things. One is, and we've already started this, and we need to move even more quickly. We have to get rid of our dependence on Russia's energy sources, and we are doing this. It's gradual. It's getting there, and at the moment, Slovakia, which was 100% dependent on Russia's oil and gas, is already making huge changes. So I'm just using example of my country just to illustrate that it can be done, and can be done very quickly, and we just have to keep it up. We have to keep it going. And by the way, this is one way how we can also ultimately be more effective at the green transition. And that could be one of the positive aspects of this terrible situation in the long run. But it is not going to be overnight. It is not going to be easy or cheap, and there are going to be consequences. And the EU, in addition to moving away from Russia's dependence, has to compensate. And I think this month will be extremely important. We are going to discuss Europe solutions for the energy crisis. I think there is a lot that the EU can do in how the energy market works, because we have an energy market. And so far, for instance, the price of natural gas has defined the price of electricity. So we need to look at the ways how we can perhaps change that, because this is a very different situation. And there can be caps when it comes to the price hikes also for consumers, which are driven by the EU and from the EU. There is not a single national solution to this. I think there has to be a European solution, and we have to seek a common European solution, and we have to succeed at a common European solution. Otherwise, we might have real problems when it comes to maintaining the EU energy market. So that's the second thing we can do. And thirdly, we need politics and politicians who are honest and brave to help us get through the upcoming winter. Mm-hmm. That is going to be tough. The prices are going to rise. Citizens are going to feel it. We may have some problems when it comes to the sources of energy. But I think we are certainly a lot more ready now than we were in July. And by October and November, we can be even more ready. And I think we need to honestly communicate to people that we will get through it, and we will we stand this. Russia is at war not just with Ukraine. Russia is at war with the European Union. Russia stopped the supplies of natural gas through the pipeline Nord Stream 1, and the Russians are now openly saying we are doing this indefinitely until you get rid of the sanctions you had imposed on us. So Russia is at war with us, and we cannot budge. The sanctions are there because Putin started this war. There is the evil side and there is the good side here, and I think we need to always have in mind who is the evil here. Again, here we need clear political communication, a bit of bravery, a bit of courage, and in addition with the internal strength of Europe, I think we can get through this in the next few months. But yes, I'm not denying this. This is going to be a hot topic in the coming months, and I hope that there is light at the end of the tunnel will come next spring.
And to finish on energy, a debate that we've seen emerging in France, in Germany, is whether there should be a specific taxation for the profits that were made by energy sellers because of the increase of price, as a way to finance helping consumers to pay their bills, etc. Are you in favor of something that could be done at European level to either make it mandatory or to encourage member states to do something, or you consider that would be going too far?
I think we should certainly, this shouldn't be off the table, this discussion. Let's have it. Let's have this discussion. But again, I will say this as somebody who is mindful of the realities that Europe's economic and social success has been here in part also thanks to Europe's industrial strength. So in the process, we have to have in mind also the industrial interests. So there has to be a proportional response. Yes, I think there is space for everyone to chip in, including the big corporate energy players. And yes, I think there is always a better approach to have it done at the level of European solution, European coordination, rather than individual member states. That's always good. But let's also have a proportional response. Let's look at it rationally, so we sustain the energy needs of the citizens, but also the energy needs of the industry, which has been the backbone of ultimately Europe's not just economic but also social success, and something which makes us a lot stronger ultimately in the long run when we compare it to Russia. You know, Russia is not a rich state. There are a few very rich people in Russia, and Russia is rich in natural resources, and Russia has some resources to finance the war in Ukraine. But ultimately, Europe has all the strong cards in its hands. We just have to play them right.
All right. Next week is the big political speech of the year for the EU, the State of the Union's speech. So, what do you expect or hope from the speech of Mrs. von der Leyen?
I hope that this will actually bring some answers to the questions we've discussed here on how to be more united and better equipped to face Russia, help our neighbors. How to be stronger when it comes to rule of law and the basic values which we have, and how to find some answers for Europeans when it comes to our collective but also individual social and economic futures. I think we need some clear answers, clear messages. This is what I would hope for. I think State of the Union speeches should not just be about stock taking, they should bring some hope. And what we need, because the times are tough, we need a sense of hope. We need some anchors around which the broad spectrum of pro-EU politicians from the left, from the center, and from the right can unite. Because, as I say, the next 6 to 9 months are not going to be easy. And we have to come out of this stronger.
We are slowly going towards the end, so I will conclude a bit my questions with a bit of discussion on the future of Europe. We have finished earlier this year the so-called Conference on the Future of Europe, which was meant to bring citizens at the core of the process to potentially influence the future of Europe. Now that it is over, this Conference on the Future of Europe, do you think that it was something meaningful, or that the way it happened, it's ended up being more of a gadget than anything?
I think in the end it was meaningful. Now, it was meant to be very different. Let's also say this very honestly. The Conference on the Future of Europe started a year late because of the pandemic. It had been postponed. The plan was completely different. It was derailed by the pandemic. Then the context of the discussion also changed in some important ways because of Russia's invasion. So there have been a number of unexpected variables. Nonetheless, I think it was a success because it brought together a number of people inside individual member states, but also in Strasbourg, in Brussels, who were able to discuss the various questions in terms of what Europe does for them and what Europe should do for them. And I think we have a very solid set of recommendations in a number of areas. And I would hope, and this is where I support the position of the European Parliament, that we can take this up in the Convention on the Future of Europe. Because if we are serious about the European future, if we are serious about enlargement to the Western Balkans, but also to our neighborhood, we need to change some of the rules of our own game. So we can work together in a larger setting. And so I think the conference has been meaningful. It's put together a very good agenda for what I see could be a good convention. We just had a very good discussion today with the minister representing the council from the Czech presidency in the Constitutional Affairs Committee just this afternoon. He said the Czech presidency is going to be as much active in this as they can, trying to push the discussion forward so we can have some sort of response from the member states. But I think this is, again, one of the examples where the ball in European politics is not necessarily in Brussels. It is in Paris, it is in Berlin, it is in Warsaw, it is in Madrid, it is in Bratislava too. And we should be asking the politicians there, because as much as we as MEPs are European politicians, those leading national governments are also decisive European politicians.
And besides the Conference on Future of Europe, if you could snap your fingers and you can change anything about the EU, the way it does policy or whatever, what would you change and why?
If I could change anything about the way the EU works or it doesn't work, is that the question?
Anything you can change about the EU, you snap your fingers, it's done. What do you do?
Well, I would like to see Ukraine win this war, because at the moment, this is the biggest game changer in Europe. If Ukraine loses this war, it could really unravel the European project as we know it. So we have to get stronger, get united, stand behind the Ukrainians. And I think if Ukraine succeeds, we can build a stronger and a better Europe for everyone. So if I could do one thing, I would stop this war, but not stop it by freezing it, but stop it so that those who started it really pay the price.
All right. And the traditional question, final question on the channel, where do you stand on the debates about a federal European Union? Are you in favor? Are you against? Are you on the fence? What's your take?
I am a pro-European politician, very much so. I've always been for European solutions, for integration, but I am not blind to the political realities. Europe is a federation in the making. There are federal principles which we follow. We have Europe in our pockets with the Eurozone and Euros. We have the free movement of people with Schengen. These are great achievements, and I very much cherish them, value them. And I think we need to reinforce this. So on that spectrum, I am certainly more of a federalist than anything else. But I am very much mindful of the fact that Europe can be built not successfully, not just from the center. It has to go hand in hand with those who make it, the citizens in the member states, in the cities, in the regions. So they have to feel comfortable. And that's why I'd say that we have to bring the European discussion, the European debate much more out of the Brussels bubble to all of those citizens and policymakers at different levels of policymaking, and then we may have more success of building a stronger Europe. But certainly, I am a pro-European politician who sees value in Europe integration and sees added value, certainly for countries such as mine, a small country which 30 years ago didn't even exist, has a seat in decision-making circles of the European politics. I am privileged to be an MEP and not only to discuss, but also to co-decide European politics. I think that's wonderful news for everyone in Europe. And particularly the small countries, but also the big ones, should feel strongly about the possibilities that some federal ideas allow us to pursue because it makes us stronger. We have to be stronger with respect to Russia, with respect to China, and we will only achieve that if Europe becomes stronger.
Well, that's very clear. Thank you very much, Vladimir Bilcik, for all the time you took to answer our question. Before I let you go, if people have to remember one thing from tonight, one thing that you want them to go back home with from the interview, what it is?
Keep your hopes up. Keep working on Europe. Europe is hope, and hope is Europe for me. And we need it. We are in for some tough times. Europe has to win. Europe has to win in the war. Europe has to win with the citizens. Europe has to win against the far right, the far left, the disinformers. There are many destructive forces which want to destroy Europe. Let's cherish it.
That's fine by me. I can get behind that message. So thank you again, Vladimir Bilcik, for taking the time. Chat, make sure to thank Mr. Bilcik for his time as well. Thanks again. I hope you enjoyed the interview and the format. I don't know if it was your first time on Twitch.
It was my first time on Twitch. I really enjoyed it.
You did great.
Thank you.
You did great.
Thank you for all the questions also from the audience, and I will be happy to be back. And of course, if you have any questions related to my agenda, don't hesitate to contact me directly.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening, Mr. Bilcik.
Bye-bye.
All right. Let's start the discussion and the debrief. Let me change my up thing. Okay, I have to end Zoom because it conflicts with the camera, so that I'm being told that apparently I need to buy a second camera. Let me just do common thing. Work. There you go. Hello. Let me. I have a fancy new tools that I learned how to do. So I'm gonna make a nouveau sondage. Did you enjoy the interview? Yes. No. Sazou Michel. Bim, bam, boom. We'll do that for 2 minutes. There we go. Vote in chat. So yeah, it was a good interview. Very dense. I had much more questions planned on different topics, but it was very interesting. We discussed a lot of things. This guy's camera advertising. Yeah. It's just that I discovered that I had a conflict of cameras just before the start of the stream. So until I get a new camera, I will have to do this kind of a manipulation at the end of interviews. But well, that's not a big deal. But yeah, it was interesting. We discussed about a lot of things. Let me get back. I have taken my notes as usual. So what did we talk about? We talked for quite a bit about rule of law. So there, Mr. Bilcik was pretty insisting on the fact that it's not only Hungarian and Polish problems. There are rule of law issues in every member state, more or less. Even if I think we can all agree that Poland and Hungary are the main offenders these days, and we discussed at length about the new tools that the EU has to tackle these kind of issues. So we discussed about the so-called conditionality mechanism, so that allows the EU to suspend funds for countries that infringe the rule of law. So that means that if you infringe the rule of law, you don't get EU money, and for some country it's quite a hefty sum. Like for if you take countries like Poland is the country in the EU that benefits the most from EU funds. It's 2 to 3% of their GDP, and so they have been cut off of a number of funds, literal billions of euros that they can't get until they fix the rule of law. We discussed about Article 7. So Article 7 is in Council. Is the original tool to deal with rule of law. Initially, that was the way it was envisioned, that if a country does not respect rule of law, then member states can take measures and ultimately even suspend the voting rights of the country in question in Council. Meaning that, for instance, let's say that if Article 7 was activated against Poland, Poland would not be allowed to vote for a certain time until it fixes the rule of law. It will not be allowed to vote in Council on EU directive, EU regulation, etc., etc. The problem is that this tool, which the member states have tried to activate against Poland and Hungary, are blocked. Why? Because to activate this mechanism, which is basically the nuclear option, because you're literally preventing a country from having a say in European affairs for a certain amount of time, you need unanimity, minus of course the country that is concerned. So if all countries apart from Poland agrees, then you can suspend the vote. But since we have problems in Poland and Hungary, what we've seen is that when there is a vote on Article 7 against Poland, Hungary vetoes it, and when it's about Hungary, Poland vetoes it. So they're covering each other, which led to the creation of these new tools to, let's hit at the wallet where it hurts and try to push these countries to change the rule of law through financial incentive. But there are other tools. He mentioned the anti-SLAPP directive, so a new tool that prevents abusive legal procedure to let's say force journalists to not talk about issues that are problematic for whatever company, whatever government, whatever, like you threaten to sue them in justice to make them shut up. And so the anti-SLAPP directive is meant to prevent this kind of procedure to protect journalists and allow them to do their job. We talked at length about the DSS, or the Digital Services Act, which is the new big digital regulation of the EU that was adopted just in July. It's a big text. There's plenty of things in there, but there's notably things about pushing the biggest platform to act against disinformation, against harmful content, against illegal content. So there's an entire rule book to try to improve the situation compared to today. It will allow member state and researcher to have a look at algorithm, because algorithm on Facebook, on Twitter, on Google, we don't really know how they work. So with the DSA now, they will be allowed to have a look at the algorithm to better understand how they work and see, okay, what is causing problems and what the company should fix. So there's plenty of stuff being done through the DSA and other. And he made the reminder that indeed DSA was proof that of the interest of doing things at EU level. He said, yeah, I'm from Slovakia. My governments cannot talk with Google, with Facebook and the others because we're too small for them. We're small fry, so they don't give a shit about, we're too small a market. They don't give a shit. They don't have an interest in discussing with us to tackle these issues. And on the other end, at European level, you have a market of 450 million people. Of course, this company will listen. So that's why on these topics, it's important to work at EU level, because that's where you can have weight, that's where you can act, and that's also where you can a bit balance the odds when you face with big European, global companies. I would say even. And also he mentioned also the ability of these things to influence outside of the EU. That's the so-called Brussels effect. So the ability of the EU to influence laws outside of the EU. So the classic case study about that is the GDPR, so the data protection rules, which the EU was pretty much the first to take very ambitious privacy rules, and these rules became a model around the world, and you had countries around the world that were more or less copy-pasting the European rules because they thought that's a good model. In the US, a number of companies had to change their rules and de facto, to an extent, apply European rules all around the world because that was the standard. So, like Amy is saying, in fact, it's indeed a form of extraterritoriality. It's not officially extraterritoriality because it's not the EU saying you will have the obligation to apply my law outside the EU. Is de facto because of the way the EU is and works, the fact that it's a big market, that it's homogeneous, it's an interesting market for companies and countries outside the EU. They have an interest of having access to the EU, so they will voluntarily mimic or apply the EU rules and mimic these rules back home because it becomes de facto the standard. So that's called the Brussels effect. What else did we talk about? We talked about spyware as part of the Pegasus committee. So Pegasus is not a fancy name because people like Pegasus. Pegasus is the name of a spyware that was sold, that is still being sold by an Israeli company, the name of which I forgot, NSO. That's NSO Group, which is selling around the world this spyware to governments to allow them to officially to spy on terrorists, on criminals, etc. But there has been a number of cases where we learned that these spyware have been used to spy on journalists, on political opponents, on EU leaders themselves. So we know that, for instance, the Spanish Prime Minister was spied on through Pegasus. We know that Macron in France was spied on, was targeted by Pegasus and other spyware like that. In Greece, we know that the government used the Pegasus, well, not Pegasus, another spyware Predator, to spy on one of the leaders of the opposition, who happens to be an MEP. So all around the EU, we have problems related to that, and he mentioned that as well. it's both an issue of governments using spyware against their citizens, and also government being targeted at the same time by the same thing. So, to give you a concrete case, Spain. Like I mentioned, Spain was spied on, the Spanish government was spied on through spyware. We don't know exactly by who. There are hints that it comes from Morocco because of immigration and problems related to Sahara. It's complicated and all that. So the Spanish government was targeted by this spyware, but at the same time, the Spanish government also used the spyware to target Catalan activists at the time where there was the independence, the attempt at the independence in Catalonia. Spyware were used to target these Catalan independentists. So it's a bit all around, and so the parliament created a committee of inquiry to learn more about these things. So a committee of inquiry is not meant to create law; it's meant to allow the parliament, allow MPs to learn more about practice, maybe so that in the future they legislate. But for now, they want to understand better how things work, what was the impact, etc. So it's a lot of hearings. They're inviting people. So he mentioned that this week there will be a hearing specifically on Greece. So there will be researchers from Greece coming to the parliament to explain, okay, what was the situation, and let MEPs understand the thing better, and give them the tools to then decide later, okay, should there be EU regulation about these things. And on his side, he said that even if there should be a framework, they should not be banned altogether, because there are legitimate reasons for using this kind of technology to fight terrorism, to fight crime, this kind of thing. But you need a framework. We talked at length about Serbia because he's a standing rapporteur for Serbia. So what is a standing rapporteur? When you have a file in the parliament, you have what is called a rapporteur that is appointed. So basically, the MEP who is responsible for the file is the one who is going to write the report, who is going to lead the process. This person is called the rapporteur. And normally, it's for every report, you have to decide every time who is going to be the rapporteur. So on every file, it's going to be a different person, a different process. You have to restart the whole thing every time. A standing rapporteur is when you know that the topic will be very regular and that will be monitoring all along. At the very beginning of the mandate, the parliament will say, okay, we won't name a different rapporteur every year, every 2 years to assess the thing. We will name one person, and during the entire mandate, he will be the one responsible for that. So that's his case. That's a standing rapporteur. So Mr. Bilcik is the standing rapporteur on Serbia, meaning that as part of the in the parliament, whenever there is the report on the state of Serbia in relation, etc., he's the one in charge of that. So, and there is no, it's for the entire mandate. So he's the standing rapporteur from 2019 until 2024. So that's the standing rapporteur. He's the lead guy for Serbia. So yeah, we discussed that Serbia was a bit problematic, the problematic child in the Western Balkan, that at the moment it was not ready to join the EU because of internal problems of the relationship with Russia, the long-standing issues with Kosovo. At some point he said Kosovo, but for the most of the conversation he was saying Pristina. So I was wondering, is that because he doesn't want to say that he recognized the independence of Kosovo or not? In the end, he did say Kosovo, so anyway. But I'm saying it's interesting because not all countries in the EU recognize Kosovo. For instance, Spain does not recognize Kosovo for a very obvious reason, because they have Catalonia. So since they have a separatist, their own separatist region, they don't want to encourage them by recognizing Kosovo as independent, which will be potentially an issue later down the track if Kosovo wants to join the EU, because obviously Spain would have to, and other countries would have to recognize the country first, but that's another issue. And overall, there is a frustration in the Balkan. So there is 4 countries in the Balkan currently that want to join the EU. You have, help me out there. There is Serbia, Montenegro, Albania, and North Macedonia. If I'm not mistaken, I don't think I forgot anyone. So these 4 are official candidate to join the EU. So there is negotiations occurring there to make sure that they could potentially join the EU. And there is a frustration for a number of years in these countries because they feel that even if they have the status of candidate, and so there is negotiations being done, and so they are making reforms internally to, let's say, catch up with the EU, because to join the EU is not just I like you, plus Bosnia and Herzegovina. Thank you, Ari. So it's 5, actually. Okay, it's 5 in the Balkan. What was I saying? Yeah, so it's not just, oh, I like you, join the club. You have a set of conditions before you can join. You have to do internal reforms to make sure that you respect the rule of law, that you apply European law before you actually join the European Union. You have to be economically strong enough to sustain competition inside the single market. So there's a whole bunch of conditions of boxes to tick, and that's why it takes a very long time to join the EU. I think the shortest joining accession process was like Denmark or Finland. It was like in 4 or 5 years, and it was like the absolute minimum. Like most countries, when they want to join, it's 5-10 years before they can. And in the Balkan, they're a bit frustrated because they feel that despite everything that they do, despite the negotiations, member states do not want to let them in for a bunch of reasons, both because of the state of the European Union, because they internally there is a concern that the EU is not solidified enough to welcome new member states, so the EU needs to sort out its own mess before welcoming other countries. There's also national politics playing a part. Like for instance, in France, you don't talk a lot about enlargement because it's a bit politically toxic. Same thing in the Netherlands. You don't know exactly whether French people would be happy with Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Let's not mention Turkey. Turkey, it's a all different hornet's nest. But yeah, there is national politics that play into it, and so these countries are getting frustrated because they say, okay, do you want us in or out? Take your pick. You can't let us on the fence all the time. And so before summer, there was actually a summit between member states and Western Balkan, and the Western Balkan countries did say, okay, sort out your mess. Do you want us in or out? Okay, so they don't have officially the candidate status, so that's maybe why I forgot them. But yeah, the thing is that while, for instance, there is a division, a debate about whether Turkey should join the EU ultimately, like for instance, France would likely veto Turkey from ever entering the EU. When it comes to the Balkan, in principle, everyone agrees. Everyone says, yeah, the Balkan belong in Europe. They are surrounded by European country. Their history is European. They should join the EU. The question is, when should that happen? And so it takes time, and it creates a lot of frustration. There is, he mentioned that during the interview, that the EU did not invest a lot of energy in the Western Balkan lately meaning the past decade, and it could come back biting us in the ass, because if countries are, if the EU is not interested in those countries, this country might be tempted to look elsewhere, towards Russia, towards China, etc. So it creates a strategic problem, a geostrategic problem for the EU as well. We realize, shit, we can't have Russia and China in our backyard. We need to re-engage with the Western Balkan and make sure that they are within the European Union ultimately, but in the meantime, within the European Union sphere of influence, roughly speaking. What else did we discuss? Energy crisis. So that's the big discussion these days. There was a long-standing problems with prices in around energy, already because of Russia and other things, but the war in Ukraine blew things out of proportion, and now as citizens are feeling the bite of gas bill, energy bills that they can't pay or are a lot of difficulty to pay, member states are under pressure to do something about it. And so now there is a conversation about reforming the way the energy market works. So it's complicated. I'll try to make it simple. Myself, I understand the rough, the big line. I'm not an expert, but okay. How is the price of energy fixed in the EU? You have an energy market. So you have a price that is set at European level. The way this price is set is according to the price of the latest energy used to fill demand. I explain. Let's say that you have a demand of 100 megawatts. Europe needs 100 megawatts of energy, of electricity. Let's say that the first 20 megawatts are done through renewable energy at a price of 10 euro. Fine, you get the first 20 at 10 euro. But you're still missing 80. I said 20. Oh shit, I'm lost in my own example. Fuck. Let's say they want 20 megawatts. You have 80 remaining. Then comes nuclear for an additional 10. The price is higher than renewable, so you are now at 30. The next 30 are, let's say, petrol, coal. Again, a price a bit higher, and so on and so forth until you reach the 100 megawatt. And so the price for the entire market will be set at the price that was required to fill the latest thing. So let's say that you had 90 megawatts that were filled, that found energy sources on the market. The remaining 10 will be the highest price. So let's say it's gas. And so this last part will set the price for the entire market, meaning that the first 10 megawatts that was for renewable, that was on paper costed like 10 euros to produce, actually is going to be set at the price of gas, because gas was the last energy used to fill the demand. Which means that of course, the price gets very high because the price of gas is very high. That also means that for the energies that are less costly to produce, they make huge margins because the price are way higher cost of production. So that means that companies that produce renewable and nuclear energy are making a shit ton of money these days because they are being paid a much higher price. But it creates tension because you maintain an artificially high price on the market. And so now there are debates on how to deal with that so that the price is not set at the price of gas, and so it become unsustainable for member states and ultimately for consumers. And so there are a number of solutions that are being discussed right now, and likely is going to be part of the announcement made by von der Leyen next week during the State of the Union on how to fix the system. So there are discussions about capping the price, meaning that you say, okay, we will pay a maximum of 50 euros on gas, and if the market price gets higher, I don't give a shit, I'll still pay 50. Other wants to decouple the price, say, okay, renewable we have to be paid at the price of renewable, and gas at the price of gas. There are discussions about how to transfer not capacity but energy, so that, let's say, energy that is produced in Spain can reach to Germany, for instance. There's a discussion about taxations, about helping consumers with checks, etc., etc. There's a lot of options, each with its pros and cons, each with its member state pushing for the option or not. So that's going to be part of the discussion in the coming month, and we'll definitely have the occasion to discuss it at the earliest next week after the von der Leyen speech. It's like buying prints for a table of 4, ordering 3 pills and 1 ID price craft beer and paying the whole thing as if you ordered. That's perfect. I'm stealing your example, really. Thank you. It's now mine. It's my example now. But yeah, it's basically like that. It's a very good example. What else did we discuss? Oh yeah, still on the energy crisis. He said at the end, winter is going to be difficult. There's going to be there's a price are going to rise. The situation is not going to be fixed. So in a way, he said, okay, it's not going to go away. He talked about the winter reserves. Winter is going to be difficult. What is the winter reserve? So, like I mentioned, the main difficulty is about natural gas at the moment because a number of countries relied heavily on Russia to get their natural gas. Now that Russia is being Russia, they cut the supplies, and so it becomes very complicated for these countries to have gas. And so the problem that we have is what happens if, and that's the objective of Russia, is that Europe runs out of gas in the middle of winter. And so we create a situation where people are not able to, people or companies are not able to function because there is no more gas. And so since spring, countries are, and the EU is looking left, right, and center for gas outside of Russia to try to replenish the reserves so that they can go through winter. So, for instance, at the moment, reserves, the strategic reserves, so the gas that is being put aside by countries to go through winter, in August they were at 80%, more or less. So that means that the EU had replenished 80% of these reserve of gas, of natural gas, in August. Usually that's a level that they are in November, so that shows that they are trying to do a lot of things on that front. But that's a strategic question, how if the EU would manage to fill its reserve and so become, I don't want to say impervious, but less sensitive to Russian pressure, because Russia will not have as strong a leverage on the EU because of energy. And so that's a strategic question. Nice job trying to bring in the debate on taxing exceptional energy profits. Felt like he fiddled his way out of this one though. Yes and no, because he fiddled his way out in the sense he said, he didn't say, yes, I absolutely want it or I don't want it. He said that should be on the table, but that's a discussion that needs to happen. And to an extent I understand, because he said it at the beginning, we are waiting to see what the Commission will announce next week, and it will be discussion between member states and all that. So I can understand why he fiddled a bit out of it, because it's difficult for him to take an absolute position, because we don't know exactly what the Commission is going to propose, exactly where member states are going to position themselves, etc. But he did say that he was not ruling out the position. EPP favorite, yes, but the free market, I mean, that's an EPP, that's the EPP line. I mean, I don't have anything against this line, just like the Greens have their own line, the SND has its own line. They say, yes, of course we need to act, but we have an industry to take care of, there is a market, etc. We need to remain proportional. That's the EPP line. There's nothing surprising there. He owns it. I didn't try to say no, it's fine. We will solve everything. So no, we have to act, but at the same time, we need to also be proportionate, because we need to also protect our industry, protect the market, and all that. So I would say it was pretty straightforward on that. And on the issue on taxes on profits, I'd say it was fair in the sense that that's an option that should be on the table, and then it's up to discussion whether it should be used. But he didn't say no, taxes are terrible, we don't want taxes. So I wouldn't throw him under the bus. He engaged with it. He said, okay, that's an option on the table, but we have to see. Fair. And final topic we discussed. If you have other questions, do ask them in the chat. We discussed about treaties, the Conference on the Future of Europe, and he said that the Conference on the Future of Europe was meaningful, even if he confessed that it started with a bit of a handicap, because it was delayed because of COVID. It was influenced by the pandemic and all that. So it was hinting that it was not as good as the Parliament would have hoped, but still, he said, okay, that's a good exercise, and ultimately there needs to be a discussion about changing. ECR after all, so taxing on tends to be his arch nemesis. Not all ECRs are like that. ECRs, you also have, let's say, even if TCR is a free market to an extent, it's not completely that, depending on the country. But yeah, it would not be like he would not have been an ECR Tory, let's say. But again, I mean, as long as he owns the position, that's fair. He's free to have his position. You can argue for him, and well, you hear the arguments. You agree with them. You don't agree with them. That's another issue. At least you hear the argument. I would say that's the main thing. And that's all I had on my side in terms of notes. Any other topics you want me to comment or provide additional explanations on? I know that in the chat I missed a couple of questions because, like, again, we were running a bit out of time. I saw Z-Man asking a question, but it was on national politics, so I didn't ask him because, as a rule, we ask questions about EU politics. National politics only comes in if it's linked to EU politics, and here the question was really about Slovakian politics. So I would say it was besides the scope of the interview. I think there was a couple of the questions that I missed. I couldn't ask because of the time. We're curious to his thoughts on incoming elections in EU member states. I mean, we do have a bunch of elections coming, and we have the Italian elections. We had the process for the new British Prime Minister. I mean, it's outside the European Union, but it's still Europe. So we have the Italians. We have the Swedish elections soon. There are elections in Bulgaria, and I feel I'm missing one. I forgot which one. But well, there's a bunch of elections coming up. The one that is going to be the two that are going to be the most rock and roll, I would say, are going to be the Italians and the Bulgarian elections. Swedish election, even if the campaign is a bit intense, I mean, we won't have the equivalent of Matteo Salvini coming to power there. But yeah. Okay, I don't see anything else, so I will conclude. So I hope that you enjoyed. We don't hear much. It's a fair point. I mean, actually, I had a question initially about the point of view of Central and Eastern Europeans about the way Western elections and all that work, but I didn't have time to discuss that. Frankly, I mean, I think I had maybe like 5 to 10 questions that I had aside and that I didn't discuss. But well, it is what it is, and that's a question that I will be able to reuse for other MEPs. If they are relevant. And speaking of which, next interview is going to be on Wednesday. Yesterday I said Thursday. I was obviously wrong. It's on Wednesday. Wednesday evening at 7. We're going to discuss with Romanian MEP from Renew, Ramona Strugariu. She's in committee, a bit in the same committees as Bilcik was, so that will be interesting to see the perspective of Renew on the same issues, and yeah, beyond that, I'm not slowly. I'm feeling the schedule for September, October, November, etc. So we have plenty of interviews upcoming. But for tonight, that will be it. I hope that you enjoyed the content as usual. If you did, like what you saw, you can follow me on the social media. I'm putting that in the chat right now. You just have to click and follow me on everything, on Twitter, on Discord. We have all the good stuff. If you really enjoy what you saw, you can subscribe. Of course, that would be much appreciated. You can toss a coin to your streamer via Coffee. And on this note, well, I wish you all a very good evening, and I hope to see you on Wednesday or next week for the next interview or the next content on the channel. Have a good one, guys. See you soon. Bye.